So one of the main innovations of this research was to produce an index for how geographically ubiquitous a job is versus how constrained it is. And so, for example, primary school teachers, this index, using the census data, is able to calculate that about 4% of all registered nurses, or about 4% of all teachers, would have to relocate for them to be perfectly dispersed in the United States, because they're already pretty dispersed. You don't have to relocate and reshuffle them around very much. On the flip side, if you were looking at naval architects, you only find them in a few cities, so you have to relocate about 80% of them to perfectly disperse them in the United States according to their populations. And so we looked at so one of the things that we did is looked at the relationship between that ubiquity and what kinds of jobs that men and women were entering. And we found that there's a very strong relationship between the geographic concentration of a job and the percent of that job that are men or women. We also find that the degree that this occupation is concentrated is also a very strong predictor of relocation. So people who are in these jobs that only exist in a few cities are very prone to relocating for work. Those jobs that are like administrative assistants, nurses, teachers, and so on, those jobs, if people relocate, they tend not to be for work reasons. They're more often to relocate for weather, for family, or for the spouse, or so on. There's always this question of, if you just look at the raw difference between the gap in the pay gap between men and women, you get one number, and then a big question is really, how much are we really comparing apples to apples? So a lot of the gap could be because of the kinds of jobs that men and women are entering. So I think to the degree that we care about this pay disparity, we should also be looking at the kinds of reasons why men and women are going to these different jobs. One of the unfortunate consequences of this research is that it's more than even just a normative reason why there's a pay gap. Unfortunately, it has to do with an institution that's very important to us, which is marriage and the household. And this pretense is very important, which is that men and women who are married tend to want to live in the same city. And unfortunately, that means that one of the ingredients for, just with those basic ingredients, you can get to the situation where, if men are entering these jobs that are geographically concentrated, and they expect that they should be able to move, and women are looking out into the marriage market, and they say, well, this is going to be harder for me in the future compared to men, then that might put disproportionate pressure on women to continue to enter these occupations. And to the degree that there are non-normative reasons why there's a pay gap, we might think of these as being some of the hardest things and some of the last things that the labor market might address to actually combat pay disparity.